All right, let's go beyond those headlines, shall we? We're doing a deep dive today
Mm.
into England's 2003 Rugby World Cup win.
Ah, yes.
That one, the one with Johnny Wilkinson's incredible drop goal.
Amazing.
I mean, everyone remembers how joyful that moment was.
Yeah.
But what about the players? What about their lives after all the celebrations died down? We've got articles, research notes, even a recent interview with Matt Dawson to try and figure that out.
Wow, Matt Dawson, he was on that team, wasn't he?
He was indeed.
Wow.
And what we found paints a much more complex picture
Mm-hmm.
than just that winning moment.
I bet, it's interesting because I think it really shows the difference between how we see these athletes like invincible heroes
Yeah.
and then the reality they actually lived off the pitch.
Right. Our sources actually describe them as superhuman individuals.
Yeah.
And the entire country was just on this high from that win.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, you just kind of assume everything was perfect after that, right?
Yeah, you do.
But I'm sensing that that might not be the whole story.
Well, and that's often the case, isn't it? I mean, it's not just rugby or sports. It's kind of a human thing,
Right.
We focus on those big wins, those exciting moments.
Right.
And we don't always see the whole person, the person behind the athlete.
So we're not here to rehash the game itself.
Right.
This is about understanding those human stories behind this massive win.
Yeah.
And what happened after the cameras moved on?
Okay.
What does success really mean when the spotlight fades, right?
Hmm.
And one of the things that really stood out to me is how many of these players really struggled with life after rugby.
Right.
Financial problems, their mental health.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of them had a really hard time adjusting.
Yeah. And, a lot of our sources talk about this. It wasn't just one problem.
Yeah.
It was kind of a whole bunch of challenges all at once.
Wow.
A lot of them just weren't ready for life outside of that really intense, structured world of professional rugby.
Yeah.
And so some ended up in a tough spot financially, and then others really felt that mental and physical toll that the sport takes on you.
It's kind of hard to read. Like Ben Cohen, he actually said he wished he'd learned to trade alongside rugby
Yeah.
because he ended up struggling to earn a living later on.
Yeah.
And then there's Phil Vickery.
Oh, yeah.
Bankruptcy, divorce,
Yeah.
and then a brain damage diagnosis.
That's a lot. Wow.
That's heavy stuff.
Yeah, and Phil Vickery's story, I think, really shows how these challenges, they kind of layer on top of each other.
Yeah.
It's not just one thing going wrong. It's this whole combination of factors
Yes,
that
yes.
can lead to these really tough situations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Matt Dawson, I think his story kind of offers a different angle on all of this.
Definitely. Because he made this really controversial choice back then.
Yeah.
He decided to focus on being on a question of sport.
Oh, wow.
And he kind of prioritized that over some of the rugby training sessions.
So he chose a TV show
Yeah.
over like World Cup winning training.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow, that's a bold move.
It was a bold move.
Yeah.
And for him, it paid off.
He was thinking ahead.
It seems like he was already thinking about his career after rugby. And,
Yeah.
a lot of his teammates, they weren't really focused on that, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah.
But his success, I think, also shows us maybe a bigger issue that was going on.
You mean the fact that they didn't have like a team plan for after rugby?
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
It doesn't seem like they all had that shared kind of foresight.
It's interesting too because Dawson, he recently said that he actually regrets not supporting each other more back then.
Oh, wow.
And he even said, we should have been doing this 20 years ago.
Wow.
And it just makes you think about how our ideas of success change over time, right?
Absolutely. It's like they were so focused on that moment,
Yeah.
they didn't really think about the long-term impact of everything they were going through.
Yeah.
And speaking of support, they created that '03 Champions charity,
Mm.
which is specifically designed to help athletes who are struggling. And that feels like a really big positive step, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It really shows that they're taking responsibility now.
Yeah, and they're aware of, that not so glamorous side of professional sports.
Right.
And I think the fact that it's coming from the players themselves
Yeah.
makes it even more powerful.
Yeah. And it's not just about the practical stuff like the money.
Right. Yeah.
It's about creating a whole network of support
Yeah.
and understanding.
And that shared experience, I think, is so important, especially in an environment like rugby, which is, traditionally very masculine.
Yeah.
To have people who really get it, who've been there, it can help break down those stigmas around mental health, and encourage people to ask for help earlier.
Yeah.
It's about building a culture of support and vulnerability.
Okay. So this deep dive is specifically about this one rugby team, but it brings up some big questions about how we all define success.
Oh.
We're seeing how even those people who are celebrated as heroes
Right.
deal with these very real human struggles.
Yeah.
It's like what we see in public is only this tiny piece of the whole story.
Right. And it makes you wonder if we're so focused on the big moments, the wins,
Yeah.
that we kind of miss those potential problems that might come later.
Right, and how do we prepare people better, not just in sports, but in any field that has this intense pressure?
Yeah.
How do we help them for those things that come after that big peak?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely something to think about.
It is. Yeah. It really makes you question this whole idea of this superhuman athlete.
Yeah.
You know, we put them up on this pedestal and we assume that because they're successful, their life must be easy, right?
Right.
But all of these stories, they really show us that's not always true.
Ben Cohen's quote really stuck with me. He said, "Why on earth did I go down that road?
Oh, wow.
Why didn't I go and get a skill set?"
Hmm.
Like, he really regrets the path he took. And it makes you think, did all those sacrifices even matter in the end?
It's a powerful thing to hear, you know?
Yeah.
Because it comes from someone who was part of this huge victory.
Yeah.
And yet he still has this feeling of disillusionment.
And it goes back to that public perception, right?
Yeah.
That image of being invincible. It's almost like a burden.
It is. It's this impossible standard to live up to
Yeah.
for the athletes, but also for everyone around them.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about other jobs, too.
Right.
Other high-pressure careers.
Yeah, like the pressure must be immense in so many fields.
It is. It really is.
It's like getting to that top spot becomes the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
And no one's thinking about what happens after.
Right.
So we're talking about redefining success, right?
Yeah.
And maybe part of that means realizing that the journey doesn't just stop when you win the trophy.
Exactly. It's about the long game, not
Mm.
just that one moment of glory.
So are we even doing a good job of supporting people? Not just athletes,
Yep.
but in any job that has this crazy amount of pressure.
Yeah. Are we giving them the tools to deal with life after they reach that peak?
I mean, this is something we can all relate to, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like when you finish a huge project at work,
Yeah.
or you reach some big milestone in your life,
Yeah.
there's always that feeling of, okay, what's next?
And that's where I think this O3 Champions charity, it's a really good model.
Yeah.
It's not just about helping people who are already struggling.
Right.
It's about changing how we think about success in the first place.
Dawson said he wished they'd started it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Like they should have been doing this all along.
Yeah, it shows how important it is to ask for help early on
Right.
and not wait until things are really bad.
Yeah. But there's also this whole culture in rugby and a lot of sports where it's seen as weak to be vulnerable, to ask for help.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's almost like these struggles, it's not just the individual's fault.
Yeah.
It's the culture that creates them.
And the O3 Champions charity, it's like they're trying to change that.
Yeah.
Make it normal to talk about mental health.
Yeah, to show that it's okay to not be okay.
What if that was the norm everywhere, not just in sports?
Yeah.
Imagine if we were all more proactive about supporting each other.
Right. Not just when things go wrong.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, it would be a real shift in perspective.
Yeah.
We gotta be willing to see beyond those highlight reels.
Yeah.
Success? It's not always a straight lineup.
No.
There are peaks and valleys.
And we need to help each other through those valleys.
Absolutely, especially after you've achieved something big.
We have to celebrate the wins.
Yes.
But we also can't forget about the people behind them.
That's it. And this charity, it also makes you think about what it means to look after your own.
Yeah.
It's not just celebrating the good times together.
Right.
It's about being there for each other when things get tough.
I think that's such an important message, and it goes way beyond sports.
It really does. It makes us rethink what success even means.
Yeah.
Are we just looking at achievements? Or are we thinking about well-being,
Right.
about how resilient people are?
Yeah, we need to look at the whole picture.
Exactly. We need to see the whole human experience.
Even for those people who seem like they have it all.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that everyone struggles.
Yeah.
And asking for help, it's not weak. It actually takes strength.
And this brings us to a really important point.
Okay.
You know, this deep dive has been about rugby,
Yeah.
but these ideas apply to so many other areas of life.
Oh, for sure. It's like we've expanded the playing field, so to speak.
We have. So how do these insights connect to other fields. How we take these lessons and apply them to our own lives.
That's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
And that's what we'll talk about next.
It's amazing how we started with this one event.
Right.
And now we're talking about like redefining success and how to build support systems
It is pretty wide.
in all these different areas of life.
Yeah, it shows how powerful stories can be.
Yeah.
Like when you really dig into these human experiences,
Yeah.
you find these universal truths
Right.
that apply to everything, not just the original story.
Okay, so let's bring it back.
Okay.
We talked about these rugby players, right? And all the challenges they faced after they won.
Right.
But how does this apply to, the average person?
Well, think about it. We all have these pressures in our own lives, don't we?
Yeah.
Like to achieve things, to get to the top, to be successful.
Yeah.
We celebrate people when they reach those goals.
Yeah.
But we don't often talk about what happens after.
Yeah, what happens after the big win?
What about burnout? What about
yeah.
disillusionment?
Or even just like that feeling of, okay, what do I do now?
Exactly.
It's like we get so focused on that destination that we forget to prepare for the actual journey.
Exactly. And I think that's where the '03 Champions charity, it's a really good example for us.
Yeah.
They're not just helping people who are in trouble. They're changing how we think about success.
By showing that even heroes need help sometimes.
Right. They're showing that asking for help, it's not weak. It actually takes a lot of strength and self-awareness.
What I think is so cool is that this whole thing, it wasn't started by some big organization. It was the players themselves.
They're the ones who actually lived it.
Exactly. And they're basically saying, hey, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah. And it's more than okay to ask for help.
So how do we take that idea, that way of thinking, and apply it to other fields?
That's the big question.
Like, what would it look like to have that kind of support system in business, in school?
Yeah, in the arts, anywhere where people are under a lot of pressure.
I think it takes a big change in mindset.
It does.
We have to move away from that idea of every man for himself.
Yeah, it's about realizing that real success, it's not just about what you achieve as an individual.
Right.
It's about supporting each other through the whole process.
Yes. Celebrating the wins together and helping each other up when we fall.
We need to create a space where it's okay to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Where asking for help is encouraged.
And where people feel like they can admit that they're struggling.
Even the people at the very top.
Okay. So that all sounds great. But what can we do as individuals?
It might seem overwhelming. Like, how do you change a whole culture?
Right.
But it starts with small things.
Like what?
Check in on your friends, your family, your colleagues.
Yeah.
Especially the people who seem like they're doing great. Let them know you're there for them, not just when they're winning.
Yeah.
But also when they're having a tough time.
And we have to be open about our own struggles too, right?
Exactly.
Show that it's okay to not have everything figured out.
Yeah.
And that it's okay to ask for help.
The more we talk about these things,
the
less stigma there will be around vulnerability.
And then we can create that culture where everyone feels supported.
Yeah.
All right, so to wrap this whole deep dive up, what are the big things you want our listeners to remember?
Okay, so first, remember that even those big celebrated wins can have a hidden cost.
Okay.
What we see in public isn't always the whole story.
Right.
Everyone faces challenges, even the people we think are invincible.
Right.
Second, you got to plan ahead and build that support system early on.
Yeah, not just in sports, but in any job that's really demanding.
Yeah, figure out what you're going to do after you reach that peak.
Right.
Build those strong relationships. Be open about the tough stuff.
Yeah, it'll help you in the long run.
And last but not least, remember that real success, it's not just about getting to the top.
Yeah.
It's about the whole journey.
Right.
It's about being aware, being resilient, and helping each other out along the way.
I love that.
Yeah.
This has been about so much more than just rugby.
It has.
We've all had a chance to think about how we define success.
Yeah.
And how we can support each other as we try to achieve it.
Exactly. And I'll leave you with one final thought to think about. What really stood out to you today? What can you do to create a more supportive and fulfilling life for yourself and the people you care about? Keep exploring, keep asking questions. The journey's never really over.